Hi, my name is Dorothy Pierce, and I'll be doing my presentation on Dorothy Wordsworth. Dorothy Wordsworth was the sister of Williams Wordsworth, the Romantic poet. Dorothy was born in Crockett Mount, Cumberland, England, on December the 25th, 1771. Um, she died on January the 25th, 1855, at the age of 83. Her parents was James and Anne Wordsworth, and she was the third of five children. But Dorothy was the only girl out of the five kids. She was very close with her brother William, and she was separated from her brothers at the age of 6 upon the death of her mother. Now, during that time, she stayed with several relatives, her aunts, uncles, and even her grandparents. But things was not always good once her dad died. So, in 1795, she went to live with her brother, William, that she was very, very close with. And she stayed with William until her death. Things that Dorothy liked to do was daily walks with her brother, traveling, and writing in her journal. In 1798, Dorothy began to write her first journal. Now, mind you, none of her journals was published until after her death. But she wrote in her journals for her own pleasure and for her brother William's pleasure. Most of her writings explored the natural world. Um, Her journal writings describe the Wordsworth household, things that went on in the household, her friends that she had at the time, even including poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge, because they was all friends, and their travels. They traveled a lot, so she wrote a lot about their travels as well. William depended upon his sister's description of people and natural scenes to furnish him with poetic material. So he got a lot of his material from his sister. And most people later on in life may have thought that he was a copyright or plagiarism, as you can say, of her work because he got a lot of work from her. He depended on her description and everything. So none of her journals was published, like I said before, until after her death. She became ill in April of 1829. No one expected her to live once she expected her to live um, or recover from her mental illness at that time. But she did, but she was never the same. Dorothy died 5 years after her brother William passed. And she died in Rockdale Mount, Cumberland, England. Now, her journal writing for years in Oxfordale and Gasmer reveal most clearly Dorothy's personality and her relationship with her brothers. When you read those entries, you can see the relationship that she had with her brother and her personality per se. This was during the years in which William produced many of his fine works. Her description of her life during this period gave a vivid expression of her as a modest woman that where she, took care of her family and her friends during that time. The dominant force in her life was her passionate affection for William. At times, she would speak in her writings um, and refer to William as her lover more so than her brother. And I think that caught a lot of people's attention. So, one of her entry writings on April the 15th, 1802, from the journal writer Grasmer, if I'm saying that right. It was a threatening, misty morning, but mild. We set off after dinner from Ishmael. Miss Clarkson went a short way with us, but turned back. The wind was furious, and we thought we must return. We first rested in a large boathouse, then under the frenzy bush opposite of Mr. Clarkson. Saw the pledge going in the field. The wind seized our breath. The lake was rough. There was no boat by itself. There was a boat by itself floating in the middle of the bay between Watermill Lock. We rested again in the Watermill Lock lane. The hawthorns are black and green, the birch here and there greenish, but there is yet more of purple to be seen on the twigs. Now right there she was talking about the nature, how the flowers and the twigs and all of that look. She gave vivid descriptions of how nature was. We got over into the field and avoided some cows, people working. A few primroses by the roadside, woodsaw flowers, the annual seamless violet strawberries, and the scrawy yellow flowers, which Mrs. C called Powworth. When we were in the woods beyond Galbury Park, we saw a few daffodils close to the waterside. We fantasized that the sea had floated the seas ashore, and that the little colony had so sprung up. But as we went along, there were more and yet more, and at last, under the broad of the tree, we saw that there was a long belt of them along the shore, about the breadth of a country turnpike road. I never saw daffodils so pretty. They grew among the moss stone, above and above them. Some rested their heads upon their stone. Now she's talking about how the daffodils was just laying there so pretty, with their heads laid up against the stone. That's a real vivid description to me. On a pile of weariness, and the rest toasted and reeled and danced, and seemed as if they're verily laughed with the wind. They blew upon them over the lake. They looked so gay, even glancing, even changing. The wind blew directly over the lake to them. So she's saying that the wind blew over there just to give them some, make them dance and blow in the wind. Like when they was wind blew over there, they was just swaying back and forth like they was dancing. There you hear a little nod and a few scragglers higher up, but they were so few and not to disturb the simplicity, unity, and life of that one busy highway. We rested again and again. The bay was storming. Now she's talking about how the wind was blowing, and during their travel, it was storming, raining, and everything was, not so good. All was cheerless and gloomy, so we faced the storm. At Dobson, I was very kindly treated by a young woman. The landlady looked sour, but it was her way. So she's talking about how the landlady looked. She may have looked like, oh, I don't want to be here, or, whatever. I can look how whatever. But that wasn't really how she felt, or that wasn't the personality that she gave out. We can all look one way, but once you get to know us, we can be seen as a different way. William was sitting by a good fire when I came downstairs. He soon made his way to the library, piled up in the corner of the window. He brought out a volume of Enfield speakers, another Miscellaneous, and the odd volume of Coleridge play. We had a glass of warm rum and water. We enjoyed ourselves and wished for Mary. It rained and blew when we went to bed. So at the end of it, she's saying when it rained and blew, when we went to bed, it was still storming and still raining whenever they called it a night. So during this travel, I seen that she did describe the nature of the flowers and how the lake and the wind was blowing and how it was raining and storming, the misty morning and all of that. So she does have like vivid descriptions of nature and how she described the lady. She looked one way, but she was not that way. So for this journal entry was written during 1802, a trip to Lake District. She was on this trip with her brother William, which she mentioned that, he went, when she went downstairs, he was downstairs. William would later use this journal entry as inspiration for his poem Daffodils, and we know that she talked about how the daffodils was so pretty, how the wind was blowing them and they was swaying like they was dancing or whatever. So I would say, like others would say, she may not have been the poet during those times, but once her journal writings came about, she became famous after her death. But her brother William and her friend Samuel Caldwell used her journal writings as I would say, as something they use more for their poetry during the romantic periods, because they wrote a lot about nature, so they got their ideas from her. I hope y'all enjoyed this, and I hope y'all got something out of it. I thank you very much.